Oh, hey. I'm recording a video with Photo Booth with my computer for the first time, so this is good. I'm really hungry right now, though, so I'll probably get hungry and, eat my oatmeal and then come back and then finish my video when I come back upon return. So, I don't know if this is going to distract me when I can see myself. Okay, I'm going to minimize this. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so all you guys up there. So let me talk about my new project, my new dealio. It's actually the project that everything else is revolving around, okay? So it's not like a new project, it's just like the motherlode project. Called Bike School. I introduce you to Bike School. It's the new education economic model for America. Okay. It is what's gonna save us from damnation. It's the answer to all. It's the thing that takes us to the next level, the next valency level, punches us through completely to the new paradigm. So in order to, whenever you're talking about something that's that revolutionary, you have to actually explain concepts first, or else people are just, you're saying words and all people are hearing are the words, they're hearing like revolutionary, school, smart, but they don't put the words together with concepts because the concepts are just beyond their brain power. So you have to actually explain the concept to the people first. So this could end up being a little bit of a long video, but as soon as I get hungry, I'll go and I'll come back. So, Bike School. Let me just start by explaining the first concept, the most important concept behind Bike School, okay? At least the way that I see it, and I'll try and piece it together. What's the best kind of thing that anything work? What's the best kind of machine? What's the best kind of machine? Is it the machine? Like what is the difference between the first model of a machine and the finished product of the machine? You know what I mean? Like what's the difference between a T model car and a modern day sports car? What's the difference between the first computer and a modern day computer? Really? Let's think about it. Okay, so the first thing, like the first computer was like this big old thing. It's a difference between big things with lots of moving parts and very small, efficient things with no moving parts. Okay, like it's like comparing the Wright brother airplane to a flying saucer. Okay, the Wright brothers airplane is like all these little things like screwed together, and if one thing breaks, the whole system breaks, and and it goes boo 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 boo, and it overheats, and it's expensive to build and all that, but lots of little moving parts. But a spaceship, a flying saucer, is just this like glowing orb. Just you go in it and it's just seamless. Like you look at a modern car and it's all seamless. You're like, how did they build this? Because it's just like one thing. Just like. So that's kind of the concept of Bike School. Bike School is just like this one glowing orb with no moving parts. It's a self-perpetuating machine. There's this alien Bashar who says that in their planet that they teach the kids how to make self-perpetuating machines by making these little coils that are the same shape of as a golden mean spiral, which because it collects energy from the cosmos and just sucks it in. So that's the concept behind Bike School. You create a framework, like this big framework that just sits there statically. It just sits there like this. Because it's perfect. It's statically perfect. Kind of like how people used to view the sun and the moon, like there's just this perfect geometrical configuration. It's just perfect. Like that's what Bike School is, just perfect thing. And then the people come in and they just get funneled through it, but they fuel themselves. Okay, there's no moving parts. So it's kind of like this thing that just grabs the potential of human potential, right? That just sucks into it, and then they just take care of themselves. You combine the framework with the meat sacks, and you have activation. It's kind of like when you put the sperm with the egg, or like the gatekeeper with the key holder. you know. So you have the framework, and then you have the little people coming in who are looking for their guidance. They get hooked up, and that's it. There's no moving parts. And when I say no moving parts, I mean like there's no. Okay, so it's now we're going to talk about the difference between, the paradigm shift difference between the modern school system and bike school, right? Because modern school system would have all the moving parts, all the teachers, and then the grading, all the different tests and grading system, and that's confusing, and then like you have and all the rules, the stupid rules to have to prop up this false, thing. They're trying to make it appear to be, educational. So they have all these little rules. So it's like you got to take the test on this day, or you got to take this test where you can take that and that test, and nobody else gives you a reason why. So then they change. You kind of like Scientology, and then they change it. And nobody knows why, just because it makes it appear so they can make more money or whatever. It just causes confusion, And you go, oh, you're taking classes you don't have to. You're not interested, and you don't want to take just because somebody said that those are the ones you have to take to get this degree, and because these are the ones that they offer. And it's just people meddling in your affairs just to meddle because they want to make it appear like they're doing something, So like, but the big thing about schools is, you got to travel to the classroom, you got to travel back home, you got to when you have a classroom. See, the main thing about moving parts versus non-moving parts, there's no classroom at bike school. Okay, the classroom is you got the building, but when you have the building, you have to have the janitors, and then you have to have the water and the heat, and then the property taxes, and then the maintenance of the building, and and then they have to hire all these. It's just this huge, expensive thing, and you have people coming over here from one place to another and live, and then you have to pay rent, You're going to move somewhere else. Anyway, so it's just too many hoops to jump through, and it's at the end of the day, you're not really educating. You're just teaching people to follow and to, jump through hoops just because, and just to waste time and money. Okay. Now, if you can take all of those extra expenses out, buildings, salary or salary for all the different mechanisms, because it's not just the teacher who you pay salary for. Then you have to have all these different administrators. You got to have the president. Then you got to have the, all these different office workers and it's just crazy how many different workers you have to have, and teaching assistants, and oh my God, so much money. And everybody knows how much money schools. I'm not even going to go there. So you can compare that to something with no moving parts and no salary other than, I guess, the teacher is the only person you would pay, but nobody else, because it's a thing where it's a self-perpetuating cycle. It is it's something where people have motivation to succeed, okay, because nobody is looking over their shoulder and making them. Like, if they don't do it, they're not going to do it. And if you don't do it, you can't even participate at all, because you have to participate, So it's like it's an all or nothing type of a thing. So let me actually explain what bike school is. Now that I've explained one of the concepts. Bike school, well, it's school on the bike. So you're like, what? Well, yeah, school on the bike. So like I would any day, and because I would be like, oh my God, sign me up. Then I know there's going to be other people who are like that. And if there's other people who are like that, then we deserve a shot. And it's something that's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. So what is it? Well, it is, it's learning on the bike, like what do you do in school? You go there and you watch people, the teacher talk. I mean, I graduated high school and then I graduated college. Okay. So I know I've done the whole thing. I know what it's about. And school is when you show up and you just watch the dude talk. So what you do is you multitask. Bike school is about weaving certain things together that are natural to the human psyche and what motivates people. And what motivates people is people doing stuff together, people doing things in a community group that can be divided into small groups all the way up to big groups very seamlessly, where everybody's communicating one big, culture. And oops, I kind of forgot what I was talking about. Talking about, bike main thing. Oh yeah, the ways that bike school facilitates people's natural inclinations. So the social part, and also having fun. People like to have fun, and when you mix fun with stuff that's important, then you're really going to do it. So what's fun? Well, going out and adventuring and riding your bike all day long, every day, all over the place. That's what's fun. So when you mix that with school, which was going to school and watching the school teachers go, well, there you go. So you just go there, and instead of riding your bike, you're also listening to the school teacher in your ears, talking. So you're listening to the thing, but you have your guide with you. A lot to do with bike school has to do with, I like to take stuff from the past and plug it into the future. And one thing about the past is ancient Sparta, the ancient warrior city-state, their culture was that each young warrior would have one older warrior as their companion. They would be like buddies who they'd hang out with, and he'd teach him his ways and bring him up through the ranks. And so that's kind of how bike school is. The teacher would be kind of like the peer, but the leader to the student. So the teacher in bike school goes out on the rides with the student, and they're both listening to the same thing because the teacher is the guide. So the teacher says, "Okay, let's go, let's listen to it," because the teacher knows that the teacher never finishes, is never done learning. He always wants to learn and listen to it again and get more insights and learn more and get better at explaining it to somebody else. So as you teach and learn, as you're teaching, you're learning. So I'm gonna start to get hungry. Let me go have some foodsy woodsy, but this was a good start. Am I recording? Oh, I am recording. Okay. Back on photo booth. Okay, so this is like 4 days later. I thought that, okay, I'm looking down. I gotta minimize this so I look at you guys. Okay, so it's like 4 days later. I went to get something to eat, and then I kind of didn't come back to the video. I knew that probably should have known that was going to happen, but here I am. I'm a little bit tired, groggy. I only got like 2 hours of sleep last night because I had insomnia, and then I had to work today. But I just had like a coffee. So I just listened to my photo booth video that I just made the other day. So I'll pick it up from there. So I explained the concept of why something with no moving parts is better, because it's just more efficient, and it doesn't inhibit the flow of energy going in and out of it with all of its little moving parts that were originally there to pull you in and just get it started, but then you get rid of that and you just build the static mechanism. So, but now I want to explain another second concept, which is the concept of the peer teacher as opposed to the master teacher. I think peer teacher is what's coming in the future. It's more natural. It's the more natural way of teaching. Peer teacher way of teaching would be, instead of the teacher getting up in front of the classroom and just babbling and putting the students to sleep and then getting mad at the students for falling asleep and then having it, just basically giving out orders, and then you have no relationship between the two. It's just this kind of basically combative thing. It makes it combative because you're not on the same team. But with the other paradigm, you see, because the teacher and the student in the paradigm that I grew up in, the teacher and the student aren't peers. Like the teacher's job is completely different to the student's job. The student's job would be to take tests. The teacher doesn't take those tests. The teacher gives the test out. The teacher is supposed to know the answers, but the teacher doesn't take the test. The student doesn't explain what they learned, just the teacher explains. And the teacher doesn't get graded, only the student. So different set of responsibilities. And that's not natural in the natural world. In the natural world, you're a team, Think of the way like the parent and child relationship is, where you go out hunting, and then you're with your kids, and the parent goes and hunts the animal, and the child watches as the parent does it. So the parent's actually doing it and just bringing the kid along, or else the kid helps and they do it as a team, and then so it's not come here and watch me do it, and and then on Tuesday you're going to do it just the way I do it, and I'll watch. If you do it any differently, then you fail or whatever. And I think learning is teaching people in actual school is can be done in a peer way, because if you're teaching, for example, I think the student should have one teacher for the whole school, or at least try to tend toward that direction. But so like if you're teaching something, like if you're teaching history, you lecture the student, but you take the same test as the student, and you show where you failed. You can admit where you didn't get 100% on the test. The student takes a test, so you can see how you're better than the student, like in a measurable way. Like they're 52% and you're 98% on the test. But they lecture you about what they learned, because from whatever interest they have, and so I'm trying to talk about the peer teacher relationship, not in the context of bike school, but in the bike school, it really works like that, because if you're going to be, I think it can be done like that in the classroom as well, more like that than it is now. More where your teacher and the student are working on the same thing, working together. More involvement in each other. But in bike school, it's actually set up to be like that, because when classroom is out on the bike ride, while the teacher and the student have to be riding together, so they're drafting off each other and they're actually riding together. It's a contact sport. And as far as the history goes, it's very interactive, and they're both participating in it, because when you're listening to the audiobook, see, the teacher is the guide. Oh yeah, let me go back to what I was saying in the first part of the video about about its connection to history, to the past. In ancient Sparta, they would have their teacher, like the way that they'd have it set up. The training system, the educational system is each warrior would have his own older man who would be his mentor, and he would learn everything from him. And so you'd have just one teacher, and you would have one student, but it would work out because the numbers match, old and the young, and so they're like a team, and so there's mutual respect and motivating each other like a team that way. And so it would work. And I like modeling. That's actually a whole other concept, is modeling off of the past. So I'll explain that in another part of the video. But I think it's great to model off of the past, because they lived in the same way, in the same tribal structure for thousands of years, that they had it all hashed out and all figured out in a lot better than we do now. Right now we're kind of like swimming, like trying to figure out the new social rules that we should have and the new context that we're living in. But they were in the same context for so long that they had it all figured out, understood in a deeper way than we do now. And so I put a lot of weight on traditions that they had back then, and I like to get back to that. So the tradition of having your mentor teacher is right in line with nature, where your teacher would be your parent. Okay, so, and that goes right in line with bike school, because you have the teacher and the student out on the bike ride together, kind of like you're out on the hunt together. So now academically, how it works out is well, let me talk about physically how it works out a little bit, because the teacher and the student, see, the teacher is going to be stronger than the student in the beginning if you start them young. So, and you have ideally a strong teacher. So the student kind of drafts off the teacher and literally follows the teacher. And so the teacher can use their extra strength to know which way they're going, and so the student doesn't have to worry about where to take the turns. They can only focus on having fun on the ride and looking at the views and listening to the audiobook. So the teacher's a great guide in that way, but also academically, the teacher decides what chapter of what book to listen to in each ride and each day, because it has to have to do with the ride that they're going on. The ride that they're going on ideally would be the same ride as what they're listening to in their audiobook. They're going to the same town. And I talked about that in Sanctimonium. I'm plugging this into Sanctimonium because Bike School works with Sanctimonium. It's the fantasy world that is superimposed onto this world that is in the same exact dimensions to ancient Rome. So you're basically living in ancient Rome again right here in modern Boulder. So the teacher's responsibility is to make sure that you're listening to the right chapter and you're going to the right place that corresponds to the chapter. And during the ride, to let the student draft off, you conserve their energy, maybe even to take their weight. And I'll have it actually, I've decided on my website, I'm going to actually make a chart that shows exactly how much weight different levels of riders can hold according to each other so that they get leveled out on a climb. So, so the teacher's job is to decide what to listen to, okay, and where to go. And so while you're going there, the teacher says, because you start the chapter at the very same time in the morning, so as you're listening to it, you're listening to the same thing at the same time, okay? So you would do this, you pause, so you pause at the same time, and then you say, yeah, or you don't pause, because you just pull it out. Actually, you don't pause, you just pull it out, and you go, hey, this is where we are, where the part we're listening to right now, well, that's right over there, and they went from there to there, okay? And then when you get to the destination, like if you're going to a battle and you're going to go to the battle, it would be the teacher's job to point out and say, this is where the battle was, this is how big this was, and to explain everything personally. And to talk about what they know about it, because it's one thing to hear it from a static computer and reading to you, but it's another thing when you have an actual person telling you. And so the teacher tells you and can share their enthusiasm about it with the student and help fuel the student that way. And then the student can ask their own questions to the teacher, so the teacher can clarify things, because when you listen to these like plenty of ancient Rome, and these old historical stuff, you can get, especially if you're listening to an audiobook where you can't pause and you're riding your bike, especially if you're a young person, there's going to be a lot of, paces where you're not, you're confused as to what's going on in the story. And so you're going to have a lot of questions. And so to have a person right there who's an expert in what you're listening to right now with you is what is any good student's dream. So they would ask the teacher, what did they mean by this? What's a gyro? What's a this? What's a that? What do they mean by this? And then you instigate a conversation about that, and the student can share what they know. And so it keeps the student-teacher relationship up, and there's more interaction between the two, a lot more than in the traditional classroom setting. And it puts more incentive on the teacher to learn themselves, because a lot of times teachers can get by, I think, with not knowing much, because they just learn what's in the textbook, and they just follow the plan in the textbook, and they just teach the same thing year after year, and so that's just their mantra. But if you're expected to, have to know exactly where and when, everything is where you're passing through, and explain it to somebody throughout the day and answer all their questions, then you're going to be more motivated to become more proficient in the subject material. So, so the teacher acts in two functions. It's as an instructor, but he's also a motivator for the student, because the student can see the teacher develop himself and become a better and continuous learning. Because you're always forgetting things, and you're always learning. So, and the teacher and the student has new insights, which the teacher is very interested in. And the student's insight about this, because you have certain insights when you're young about things in the past that you forget about when you're older, and it'd be interesting to hear about that and keep the generational connection. Also, different generations think differently about different things, especially nowadays. So to keep the communication going open that way is educational for the teacher as well, and the student would be able to notice that, and so it motivates them both and keeps them both entertained. And so I think it's a better, so that's basically the student-teacher model and how it, concept and how it fits in with bike school really well. Now, as far as the academic, how it's good academically, I want to explain that now. I think it's better academically as well, because the goal for education, see, bike school, I think, is going to take up all of high school and all of college. Okay, so instead of doing high school and college, you do bike school, and you would basically, if you become a bike schooler, it's basically becoming a homeschooler. You sign out of the whole school thing. You don't have anything to do with all that stuff, but you can go there to take advantage of like the lab, the different scientific equipment they have in there, or the sports teams and stuff. But that's it. You don't have to like show up and be their fucking slave, So, but what's the goal of education? What's the goal? What should be the expectation for your citizen when they pop out of college? Well, colleges are kind of ambiguous in their meaning. Most people go there just so they can get a good job. So it's like the general concept is somewhere between getting a certain reputation, paying your society debts, and learning something. Learning something technical. But if you're going to learn something technical, nowadays you can just take specific classes online and just laser precision instruct yourself on that technical stuff. So college basically should turn into the same thing that high school is. It should be a government-funded, government-directed thing that makes sure everybody receives, educating all of us so that we're all at the same level of education and at a very high level of education. So what is education? Okay, so my idea of education is when you have a citizenry who is knowledgeable of all of the political decisions that we could make, and is knowledgeable of all of the ramifications of all of the decisions that you would make. So if you illegalize abortion, what would happen? If you legalize marijuana, alcohol, what would happen in the future, and what has happened in the past? So they would know. They would know history. They'd be very good at history, and so they would know the relationships between all of the things that are happening now with certain things that happened in the past. And they would know the reincarnations of all of the different, and the legacies of all of the different aspects to our society. And so they would be able to prescribe the best way to move forward by knowing history and knowing how the mechanism works, and having an idea of how to do in the future. That's an educated person. So, an educated person would know the right people to vote for. They wouldn't be easily see, like, what's a non-educated person? Let's talk about who a non-educated person is. A non-educated person is the kind of person who isn't interested in anything, in history or anything, and is bigoted against people who are not like them and don't want to learn anything about them, and are easily hypnotized by their government, because they need a leader to tell them what to think and what to do, so that they would go and just vote for, bad leaders, criminal leaders, mafia. Mafia fodder. You don't want mafia fodder. And that's what we have too much of now. I think our educational system is failing us because we have too much mafia fodder. I invented that word right now. We have too many morons walking around voting for the wrong dude and voting for the wrong rules because they don't know the results that decisions will make because they don't know history. For example, Mike Huckabee said on Fox News a few days ago that he thought we should get rid of the First Amendment because then that would fix the problems of people talking too much trash about the church. I can't remember. I'll put the video below. I'll put the video when I'm talking about what he's talking about below. But he doesn't. So he doesn't even know the value of the First Amendment, where it came from. Or how about when Mike Huckabee and Ted Cruz went to that woman who refused to let the gay people get married, went to her rally because they wanted to fight against the First Amendment, the freedom of religion, because they wanted to kind of make it their own way. So they just went against the law. And they don't realize why that law is there, that you shouldn't break that law, and that if you do that, then it'll just let people to run amok. So they're just generally uneducated. That woman is uneducated. She speaks in tongues. So we have a world where there's all these people in the world, in America, who think that, the fundamentalist Christians who think that the world was created 6,000 years ago, who think Jesus is going to return next year on 4 white horses from space and kill all of the non-Christians and throw them in the eternal hellfire, and then all the good Christians get to watch them from above, but they can't see them from below, and they'll laugh at them for eternity, and oh, what fun. These people are like trying to, and the people who think that the Bible said that gays shouldn't be married because somewhere in the Old Testament it said that you shouldn't do that. But they have all sorts of other laws in the Old Testament that they don't follow. They just pick and choose, and they don't realize they're doing that because they just listen to what their leaders tell them, like their pastor at church. And they're easily manipulated too. For example, before back in the last elections, they were going to try to make medical marijuana legal in Florida, and 90% of the people were going to vote for it when they took a poll like 4 days before or something, a week before. And then Sheldon Adelson invested $4 million in a commercial where a woman dressed as a doctor is walking down a hallway that looks like a hospital, saying that she, as a doctor, is telling you that if you vote yes for this law, then it will put drug dealers on your street corner. Okay? So, twisting words around a little bit in a really cheesy, cheap way, They're medical marijuana dispensaries on the street corner. If you want to call them drug dealer, it's got kind of like calling marijuana narcotics, okay? Narcotic. But the people were like, oh, really? Oh, that's a nice-looking commercial. Nice-looking doctor. Anyway, so yeah, 4 days later, they all changed their mind and they voted against it. Against medical marijuana in Florida, and didn't pass when it was going to pass before. Because all he had to do was pay $4 million. And so we don't want people like that. That's the kind of people we have, though. That's the kind of person that our educational system is pumping out. The people who just look to somebody to guide them. And that's how the educational system that I went through was like. I was never allowed to choose what to do a paper on. I had like maybe a choice of 3 different things, and I only had like a week to do it, and I couldn't start. I didn't know I was going to do it until, the week that I was going to do it. And, when they ask you to do a major, you can't choose. You have like couple of choices, and then so once you choose the major, you only have a couple of classes within that you can take, you know. And then there's, you know, these ones are full, so then you can only take. It's like, wait, why can't I just, if I'm going to learn and I'm paying you, why can't I just take whatever I want and like learn what I want? Aren't you supposed to learn something? I guess the idea is people aren't smart enough to learn everything. They have to focus on learning one thing within the general idea of education. It's kind of ironic, hypocritical, you know. If you're going to learn, be generally educated, you want to learn everything, not learn like English, you know. So because, you know, education is, the idea is education is you become interested, it makes you interested in everything. So, you know, yeah, so but that's what bike school is. So so bike school, the rule of the idea behind bike school, or any good educational institution, is to produce people who are enlightened, who are educated. And the way that bike school is going to accomplish this goal better than the traditional schools, even though you're out riding your bike all day long, is because it uses, it ignites the fire. Like I was saying before, the concept of just making the structure for people to go in. People already want to learn. See, that's the idea. That's the concept that the traditional school system doesn't have. I mean, they didn't have that idea with me. I was treated like I was a lump of meat who was never going to learn anything, and they had to make me learn, or else I wasn't going to. And so that's why they told me what classes I could take, you know, and you know, and if you don't turn it in by this date, they're not going to pass you. I mean, I did everything right perfectly, and they didn't pass me anyway. I got kicked out anyway. That's another video. It's called My Negative Experience with Higher Education on YouTube. But people want to learn, okay? But if you're treating it like, if you're treating people like they don't want to learn, you know, like not giving them really, not allowing them to do anything. I was never asked or allowed to write anything, but then when they do make me write something, I have to write it about something really narrow in a short amount of time. So they just make it stressful, right? So if you make education stressful, by the time people get out of school, they equate learning with stress. And so what you want to do is make people who want to learn for the rest of their life. When they leave you, they're still going to be doing what they were doing with you. You know, it's something that they already wanted to do, and you're just facilitating them. And so what do people already want to do? Well, people want to learn. People want to learn history, like cool history stories, and they want to learn how it plugs into the, you know, the world in an interesting way. And so history is the best. Bike school is the teaching of, let me talk about the mechanics of bike school now. Bike school is the teaching of history. Okay, it's like somebody majoring in history, but with the idea that history is the backbone that all of the other subjects rely on. So if you're going to become super proficient in history, you're basically super proficient in everything. You're basically a polymath, because the history is the beginning of all the other subjects. You know, like if you're going to listen to like a history book, Pliny, right? That's what you would call a history book. He was called The History is Pliny. He talks about all the different tribes, and so you're learning geography. He talks about how they do the farming, so you're learning botany. He talks about the weather. You're learning astrophysics. You're learning astronomy. You're learning economics. You're learning everything. Philosophy, everything. So, and it branches out, so it makes it so that you can choose whatever you want to learn. And so, when it's based on history, that's the best way to do it. And so, but the best way to make something an educational experience based on history is by is with bike school and with sanctimonium. And so I already explained sanctimonium, but I'll explain it in case anybody didn't see any of those videos. I'll explain it now really quickly. Sanctimonium is where I make. I actually think I just explained it earlier in this video. I put ancient Rome right on top of Boulder, so I put ancient Rome like a haystack, and I pretend Haystack Mountain, which is 300 feet high, is a pyramid in ancient Sanctimonium. Okay, so there's three worlds. There's Sanctimonium, which is the fantasy world right here in Boulder. There's the real world Boulder, and then there's real Rome. Okay, So sanctimonium kind of connects the three. So if there's like a town, like Rome had Fidenae, which was 6 miles away. So then the counterpart would be hygiene, because hygiene's 6 miles away from Haystack. And then you would have the other country, like, and I think, like, I'm going to make a fantasy town on the top of Flagstaff because, and I'll make that Alba Longa because Alba Longa was kind of up on a hill, okay, and it's about the same distance away. And so you do the same thing with towns, you do the same thing with tribes, you do the same thing with rivers and the battles and everything. And so, and you even do it with time. And so, like I said, Sanctimonium 20-year YouTube video, YouTube's show, it's that if you're going to do 1,000 years of Rome from 753 BC until 271 AD, then it would take 20 years in real life. If you wanted to condense it 50 times. So one day here is 50 days in Rome, and so you relive it. So I would act it out with Sanctimonium. So if you're going to do it with Spike School, you would have the teacher having his stage, and he would be sharing his stage, and so you could be going on the ride in his little fantasy Sanctimonium, right, this day. Because you don't have to do it, you don't have to, live the same timeline in your fantasy history every day. You can be participating in different people's when they started at different times. So, you do your teachers, and he's telling you about it, and then he can go off on yours, and he'll tell you about it, because he did it already, and he'll tell you about that period of history and the geography and of everything. And so you're learning, and you're always, and it's also the concept is that you're always learning. Like with the concept of school, you go to school and then you come home and you're tired and you do something else. But the concept of bike school, you're always working on it. So you go out, because you mix it all together, you're multitasking, because you want to be riding your bike all the time. So every time you're riding your bike, you're listening to an audiobook. If you want to do like a Strava segment or something, you can always just put it on pause and put a song on or nothing, and then just do your Strava segment, and then put the music back on, or the song or the book back on, and listen. Just as long as you remember to do that, and so you learn, and so you come home, and then you Google the stuff you're interested in, and you look at the website to try to look at the lists of things, and to and you look through the chapter titles of what's the next one I want to listen to, and what are the other ones I want to look at, and you practice the history test, and so you're constantly learning. And so if this goes on for 20 years, you would start when you're 13, and then you graduate when you're 33. Okay, so it's a 20-year program. Secondary college for 20 years, and by the time you're 33, you're good to go. Like, everything about everything. Like you could be president, you could be anything. And that's where you go to technical school, or you could be going to technical school during bike school. You could even have a job during it, because you would have more time, because you're multitasking. You're bicycling at the same time as you're learning, at the same time as your socialization, at the same time as your vacation, and you're traveling, and your relaxation time. It's all rolled into one. So, so that's how it produces better quality people, okay? Even though they're out having fun all the time, we need to get out of our head that you have to be miserable in order to be productive. Miserable makes you not productive. Happy makes you productive. Remember when, like the communists, when they're not working for themselves, they get lazy. When you're working for yourself, that's the idea of capitalism. When you're working for yourself, then you have to fuel and motivate yourself, when there's nobody looking over your shoulder. Like if you're enrolled in bike, imagine how big of a loser you'd be if you were enrolled in bike school and you never went on a ride and you never listened to an audiobook. It wouldn't work. Nobody in their right mind would continue like that, because nobody's that disingenuous. Nobody's that much of a poser, They would just drop. You're in it or you're not in it. They would just drop out and go back to normal school, And so if you're a person who wants to ride all day and every day, and you're just going to listen to the audiobooks, and you're going to be participating in the program, and you don't need anybody motivating you. You're going to be motivating yourself, because your teacher's going to be saying, let's go together. You'll be doing it together as a team. Um, and you know, and once you're out hitting the road, going down the road, you're doing it. Especially if you're with somebody else. You know, if you're by yourself, you can get like depressed and lazy and bonk, kind of just emotionally bonk, just be like, But if you're with somebody else, you know, you have to fight to stay in their draft. You know, you have to fight to stay with them on the climbs and stay with them on the downhills, and so, you know, you're there and you're up and you're alive. And oh, and plus when your blood's flowing, there's more blood going through your brain, and so you're more alert. And bicycling is the perfect situation to be in, to be learning anyway, because you're not concentrating on anything. Okay, so you can do all of your energy listening to the audiobook, but you're focused enough to be alert enough to pay attention to the audiobook and not to like daydream. So it's the perfect balance, and it's not so. In the book, it's not so like, even if it's something that's super interesting, it's just like you're talking to somebody, you know, on the bike. And if it's something that's not interesting, then you can listen to it or not listen to it, you know. So you can still pay attention to stuff that's going on in the outer world. You can still hear people talk to you. If somebody wants to say something, you just pull it out and put it back in, you know. You can hear cars coming up. And we have big enough of shoulders here that as long as you stay on the inside of the shoulder and go straight, you're not going to get hit. If you're doing this in like Texas, where people like to buzz you this fucking close at 80 miles an hour with no shoulder, you know, that's a different story. But here in Boulder, it's the perfect place to do bike school. Plus we have the mountains. And so in bike school, I have also 300 mountains around Boulder, and because I mean 300 mountains because there's 300 senators in ancient Rome, 300 people who controlled Rome, and there's about 150 people who control Iran, about 300 people who control all of China, a couple hundred people control all of America, the like oligarchy, the plutocracy, the people who donate, the big donators who donate 95% of the money to our national puppets. So the controllers, about the same as ancient Rome. So to get the concept of 300, so I think that's about the size of a cohesive unit can be of people, and so I have 300 mountains, and so when you go and climb in the mountains, it's like you also treat them like battles. Like if you're going to go to a battle in ancient Sanctimonium, you go up the mountain, and you use the mountain to look down in the valley, and then you bring a picture from a snapshot from Google Earth from the top of that mountain, with the picture, you know, the overlay of the battle on Google Earth, and you look at it on your screen on your cell phone, and then you look at it in the real life valley as you're standing on the top of the mountain, and you go, okay. So that's how the army would look like in the valley, because you can see the army takes up the whole valley and where the army is, and then you look and you imagine it there, and then you imagine the battle, and then you imagine all the inner workings. And so the teachers there are like explaining the inner workings of the battle and where the town was and how big the wall was and this trench they made and all this as you're standing on top of the mountain with the big view, right? So you're becoming interested in ancient Rome and what happened in ancient Rome, but you're also learning about the geography and geology and flora and fauna of the place that you live here, right here in Colorado, you know, learning everything. So, and also another thing about riding your bike and listening to an audiobook and talking about it with somebody, I mean, you're constantly multitasking, constantly trying, you know, it's kind of like the concept of the biker, of the athlete. You're constantly fighting. It's going as fast as you can, which keeps you alert and keeps you strong. Whenever you stop, you relax, and you know, that's kind of when you die. You know, when people retire, a lot of old people retire, then they die. They complain about this a lot in the ancient world, like when people, like Rome, you know, like, you know, Romans originally were badasses, fighters. That's how they took over all the people around them. And then they hired out their warriors, and so then when they didn't have money to hire out warriors, their warriors would kick their asses and they couldn't fight, you know. And or they, you know, in the beginning days, their corn was the best corn, and they grew their own corn. But then they got lazy, and they turned their lands, pasture lands and stuff, into vineyards for the rich, and big land palaces for the rich, and hunting ground, or just pleasure areas. And so then they just bought corn from Egypt. So then when they run out of food, they have to buy corn. They become dependent, but also they become indolent. The people, like, slothful. If you just sit on your ass and pay other people to do everything for you, then you're just gonna, like, your mind gets weak. Physically, you get weak. You get unmotivated, and then you get taken over. And so, or you become, like, unmanageable, and you become a bane to society. Like rich people are now, just like Sheldon Adelson, just spending money to change people's minds about weed just because he's got some vested interest in keeping weed illegal. So, and we do have lots of vested interest in that, the prisons, for-profit prisons and all that. Don't want to get sidetracked. But, so when you have people who can't get away with just sitting on their ass, like conservatives like to complain about the poor people. If you give the poor people health insurance, then they're all just going to sit on their ass and not do anything and become like drains on society. How rich people are, just sitting around spending their money on stupid stuff and saving their money and not spending it on programs that help people. Sorry, I get distracted. You want people to be responsible and strong. So when you make people constantly having to fight, then they're just going to stay alert and strong. So riding a bike all day long is hard. It's fun, and the fun makes it so that you want to do it, but it's hard. And learning and trying to memorize and talk about stuff and maintaining concentration and learning lists and everything is hard. But it keeps you alert and it keeps you strong. And so you're going to be a responsible citizen to the world. You're going to be paying attention to the news and the elections and what's going on in your neighborhood and this kind of stuff. And you'll know the difference between right and wrong, and you'll want to learn. And so that's how bike school will produce people by the time they're 33, a more capable person than what we have now. Like nowadays, a 33-year-old, doesn't know about history or have the interest level. They think riding 50,000 miles a year is like too hard. Riding 200 miles a day is hard. Memorizing something. So, but if you do it, and then they see other people do it, and then they become motivated, and you realize it's not hard. But it's only hard because if you're weak. So it's like you can't do it unless you're strong. It's like you either do it or you can't do it. And I love the idea of that's actually another concept. You can't fake it with bike school. You can fake it with the current system by kissing the teacher's ass, by paying somebody to take your test. I don't know. By paying tutors. If you're rich, you can get the best tutors to just talk to you, and if you're poor, you can't. But if you're in bike school, you all get the same treatment. You listen to the audiobook and have your one mentor. And so it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you trying, and you can't get away. Like with modern day school, like a modern day Ivy League school, a lot of kids go there, or the kids of the rich, to get in because their parents gave a donation. And then they get in, they just party, and they meet their future business partners, and then they inherit the business, their respective businesses, and they become business partners, but they never learned anything. They could fake it, but you can't fake it with bike school. Because, you have to be out there doing it, and when you're participating and you're suffering with everybody else, then you're doing it. But also academically. Now let me talk about the academic side mechanism of bike school. I already talked about how it works with the teachers, but the academic way that the evaluation and the testing is
the students expected to be able to make their own website and their own videos where they talk about what they know, and they're kind of like mini teachers, they're like aspiring teachers. So they how the teacher wants to always explain to the student what they know about the history and what they're doing. The student wants to be the same thing to posterity. When they're an old person, they get to watch what they knew when they were younger, and so they log it onto YouTube and and they even do it on their website, and they write what they think on their website, and maybe even make original. They can make original worlds, like there's lots of original ways to interpret history. Like, for example, with Sanctimonium, I'm making my own fantasy world based on what really happened in Rome, and so I show that I understand what's going on, and so, but you could have other kids do that, make their own fantasy worlds, but you could also have people say do the what ifs, like what if this guy won the battle and then this guy took over, and, judging by his personality and his character, he would have done this, he would have done that. If you're a fan of his, or if you don't like him, you could say he would have done this in a negative way and you could have won them done this. But you can have lots of alternate histories, and because there's lots of mistakes people made in the past, and so you can say, yeah, he shouldn't have done this, and this is what would have been the answer. And so it's perfect to train people into living now and say, okay, we should do this to have this result. So, that's one. But the most concrete evaluation is my timeline. It's filling in the blanks of my timeline. My history timeline is a color-coded, font-coded map of everything that happened in history. And I have it divided into 99 different categories, which is created by a cross-section of 9 different event types, You have like cultural event type, like a physical event type, It's on my website. And then you have 11 different event causes, like if it's like a technological development or invention or a religious cause or something, or just a natural cause. And then so you add them together, and those are the different event causes that you can color code them. And so I would just get all of the different lists of everything that ever happened, all the different battles, wars, inventions, religious leaders, religious ideas, books, everything. And then you file them into the categories, and then you create the history website, which would be fascinating to look at, because when you have all of these different fonts and colors, it makes it really easy to fixate on just that one font color. I was standing on top of Mount Ontario once, looking at the mountain south of me, and the whole mountain was covered in moss, but it was black moss and green moss. Like some of the rocks were in black moss, some of the rocks were in green moss. And so I went up and I saw how it was like a brown mountain. I could see the brown, but like the green and the brown were in kind of black, were like in different areas. It was like patches. And so I did a little visual thing where I was just paying attention to the green, only looking at the green, and the mountain looked green to me because I didn't see the black. So I was looking at the green mountain. Then I focused on the black, and the mountain was black, and I was looking at the black mountain. And so you can use that visual technique with my timeline very easily because of all the different fonts and colors. So if you want to just isolate all the different inventions from Italy, you would just look at the black, block font down the list of the black block font, or and then you go, okay, well, let me look at the religious teacher, okay, the other font, and you can just look at those, and you're only looking at the teacher, even though everything else is mixed together. And so you can go in and out of all the different of these, and you can see it all together, and it helps you see it all at the same time, like you're on mission. You plug it in. Okay, so so you just look at the history timeline, and you mix it with the geography of where you're going, and all the different aspects of your education working together to make you extra interested in learning even more. That will motivate you to look at the timeline, because you want a framework, a foundation of where it's all stored, all the knowledge is stored. And so you can kind of look at it as a game, like how I was studying Spanish. I would just, I would cover up like flip cards, I would cover up one side of the page, and I go, oh, Okay, I remember it. Yeah, that's it. And then I'd mark it and I know it. Okay, ooh, damn. And I'd look and then I'd keep look. I'd try to guess and I'd have to look and then I'd mark it off and I did it. So with my website, with a timeline, you do the same thing. Like, oh, what was that? Oh, yeah. So anyways, at the end, you gut the whole timeline. So when all you see here is for the font of the word, all you see is XXX, but it's in the font of the battle. So you know it's a battle, and it has the border of a battle. So you know there's a battle here, and the whole timeline is XXX. The whole thing. There's no information about history at all. But you're looking at the shell of the timeline, so you know. So what this is. So your job is to fill it all in. You say, okay, this battle was in this year in this country. Oh, I know what that one is. Da 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 da. And then that one, da, 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 and you just fill it in, and it's a test of your knowledge. And each one has a point, and so you have 12 hours to take the test, and you can just film yourself with your computer. You can do it yourself. Film yourself looking at the test, and you can film yourself looking at the computer, so you can't cheat. You know, even though there's nobody there looking over you, just your computer. But and so by the end of the 12 hours, you fill up as much as you can, and then you get a certain percentage, and that's your score. Forever. And if you ever want to get it better, you just take the test again. But you can take the test whenever you want, how many times you want. And each time you take the test, you're going to get better at the test anyway. And so it's a self-perpetuating thing. And it's something you can compare yourself. Like just like with my bicycling, because that's one of the sides of bike school is I have bike racer levels. And the bike racer levels, there's 100 of them. And so the best time you got on a 40K bike ride, that's your level, So it's like I'm a level 25, And if you ever want to get to a level 24, where you have to break the record, and it's the same thing with the history test. I'm a 65% in the history test. Oh, I'm a 67. Oh, now your ego gets involved. You want to study harder to beat the other guy and get a 68. So that's basically it. That's how it has no non-moving parts. It's just the test right there on the website. You take it, and then, you motivate yourself to get as high on the bike levels as you are, to go on as many of the battles as you can within Sanctimonium, to go to as many of the towns within Sanctimonium as you can, pilgrimages, and to score as high on the history test and be as high on the bike racer level and to score as high on the history test. And that's it. And that's all. There's no mechanism, there's no moving parts, there's nobody looking over your shoulder. The only involvement that the government has is that they pay the teacher so that you can, he can pay rent and pay off his mortgage and raise his kids and keep his bike running. Now at the beginning, I think I would like to make it go mainstream and eventually, but in the beginning, the beginning of something is very critical. So I think people should be expected a lot in the beginning. So in the beginning, I want to do it where 50,000 miles a year. The teacher at least rides 50,000 miles a year. And the idea is that a teacher and student ride 50,000 miles a year, but it's converted miles. So if you're swimming that day, you have to ride 50,000 miles a year. You have to average 137 miles a day. And I have it actually worked out on my website. I don't have it here, but so if you swam like 20 miles in a day, that's 137 miles on a bike. So that's your 137 miles. So I have it worked out with snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, running, swimming, rowing on the rower, mountain biking, and road biking, all converted. I think mountain biking is half to road biking. And I had that based on my results, all the different results and times and stuff. I have it all scientifically explained, so figured out. It's all ready, and it's all there. So people just go in and they try to score as high as they can, and that's it. And so they have their mentor to help them do that, because you want somebody to help you. Oh yeah, but at the beginning, how it works. Well, if you ride 50,000 miles a year, that's $50,000 a year. So that's enough. That's enough for me to live on. I think that would be considered a good, wage especially for starting something beta like this. If you're working hard, your ass off all day long, I think that's a fair amount of money to pay somebody, and it's not too much to pay somebody. It's not like people won't feel like they're getting fucking scammed or something. You're getting too much, but so that's like so if you do $1 a mile, 50,000 miles a year, you can get funded to the tune of $1 a mile. And what you get for $1 a mile or $50,000 a year is you get a mentor to a person who's you get somebody who's basically going to assure somebody else of becoming a fucking like an omniscient person by the time they're 33. They're going to know everything, because if you're actually retracing the steps of Rome, you're interested in it on a whole new level, on an experiential level. You're going to get insights, because when you listen to like Pliny, history of Pliny is like 3,000 pages. It's like as big as the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament together. And he says so many different things in there that you can take so much out of it. Little nuances, like, like he says, like, the cherry tree, you can't grow it in like Campania after fall or whatever, and so you can just piece all six things together and go, oh well, that means that Campania was this temperature, and this and that. That is kind of a bad example, but there's all kinds of examples like that, though. They think, like you can learn a lot of modern day science from Pliny, even though he was 2,000 years ago, because they studied it a lot scientifically. But you can also pick out a lot of the things that they didn't understand scientifically. Like they thought that shadows of different trees had different aspects to them, different properties to them, just the shadow of the tree, the same way that eating the tree would, and then I was even, when I was hearing that, I was imagining, well, I could imagine being in ancient Rome and doubting that and being like, that doesn't make sense. How could a shadow have an actual effect on you? It's a shadow is a shadow. And so, that would make you one of the original thinkers, so that's kind of, and so that the lesson would be, well, if you have a hunch, fight through it and try to tell people, maybe they would have gotten rid of that superstition earlier. Just little things like that. You just hear things from people. And, like if he says, like, this tribe used to be here, and before another tribe was here, and they did this, and you're like, wait, oh, so that's a tradition that has been going on for a long time back then. Like for example, if Germans like to drink beer, and then you hear 2,000 years ago some German tribe liked to drink a certain kind of beer, you're like, oh, they always like to drink beer. So you can kind of trace back certain the roots to all the different current social customs and laws and mores, everything. For example, when you carry your wife, when you get married, you're supposed to carry your wife through the threshold of the door. That's from Rome. The rape of the Sabines, the very first year of the Rome, when they actually grabbed women and carried them into their houses against their will from other towns, when they had a big party at other towns in. And so that became a tradition, that kind of stuff. So anyways, you can learn and learn and learn and learn and learn and learn. That's my point. And that's how it works when you're multitasking, because you're always doing it. Because people like to say, oh, I don't have the time to do that. Well, you do have the time if that's the time that you're spending all of your time doing, because school wastes a lot of time, Think about all the time, I think about all the time I waste, commuting to school, sitting around, getting bored, passing out, not liking it, having to take classes you don't want to take. Like, damn, why don't you just not do any of that? It'll free up your entire life to go do that very thing that's so much fun, learning and riding your bike. Oh my, all day long. Imagine riding your bike 50,000 miles a year. Imagine being on your bike all day, every day. Imagine going on a 130, 150 mile bike ride through the mountains, and that's just like, that's your day. And tomorrow you're going to go on a 150 mile mountain bike ride through the mountains. And yesterday you went on a 150 mile road bike through the flats. And that's your life. So you do every day, and you're listening to your audiobook, and you're getting paid for it because you're getting $50,000 a year, and and you're the teacher, and you're the student, and that's your life, and some amazing adventure. Like the most magic parts of life for me are when I'm having dreams, and I never remember my dreams, but I do remember my dreams when I have dreams of traveling, or being on a mountain bike ride, or a ski ride, or a trip to somewhere, and it's always like a place that exists here, or it has a counterpart here, but it's its own place there. I had a dream once where I had this ski, when I was a kid, I had this ski run, and then I did it again. I had this specific ski run in my dream in a world that doesn't exist here, and I did and I did it as an adult, but I remember doing it as a kid in the dream. I didn't do it because it's a fantasy place, and I remember getting nostalgic about it and being like, oh, I got to come here again. Let me go to that other place. Oh, and now I remember other adventures I had where I went up to this big mountain, and I wanted to do it a bunch of times, but I never did it, and then I did it, and it was fun. And it's like it feels like you're never doing it enough, and it's always the highlight of anybody's life when you go on some big adventure, climb a mountain or whatever. And it makes feels, when you look back on your life, it makes you feel like you've lived a long life and you've had a lot of experiences. It's not like, oh yeah, 50 years go by and I don't remember what happened because I was hearing the same thing every day, routine. When you're moving around physically to different places, that routine becomes a routine of non-routine. It becomes a routine of one memorable experience after another. I was saying in a video once that when I was living in my van, it became very easy for me to pinpoint when stuff happened. Like if I heard of a news story, I knew when it was because I knew where I was when I heard it, right? And I knew when I was in the different locations because I have it recorded on my website or whatever, my calendar. Everybody knows when you were in a place. I was this place between March and April or whatever. And so if something happened in between March and April, because you always know when it happened, then you know, or you know where you were when it happened, then you know when it happened. And you get it memorized. And so same thing with doing the thing. Like if you climbed a mountain and you're listening to this audio book, and then you came home and you read something, and that was the day that you did the mountain, then you're always going to know like what day, what something happened. And so it'll increase your memory about everything. And when you're constantly increasing your memory gets stronger. It's kind of like an athlete building up your muscles. The more you exercise, the more you can exercise without getting tired. The more you learn, the more you can obtain in your mind, on the surface level of your mind. The more data you have, the more that you can hold. It's like, oh, I filled up my 50 gigs. Well, let's get 200 gigs. Oh, let's fill that up. That's how computers work. That's how your brain works. Especially because thoughts can help other thoughts because they create locations for those thoughts to go. They create like vantage points, filing places to go. They're not just floating out in space somewhere with nothing to cling on to because you have no knowledge. So like if you learn a new thing, always learn that. It's like adding it. You can actually feel the dendrite growing in your brain. Oh yeah, put that right on top of of that little thing I knew about that thing. Here I just learned another little tidbit. Boom, just grew. It just like felt the dendrite pop up, because you're spending so much time on it, thinking about it, you're actually growing the dendrite. That's what grows dendrites. Not just looking at it and going, okay, but looking at it and then contemplating it, rocking it, thinking about it with the left and the right brain. Oh, now I know. So that's how bike school works. That's how bike school creates more academic people, more academic, stronger, smarter people than what we have now, which is a disaster. Morons. I can't talk it. Well, just read the comments below this very video to know what I'm talking about. And look at the fucking likes and dislike ratio on this very video and you'll know what I'm talking about. Now, would people comment to me and treat me like this on this video if they were bike schoolists? If they were 33 years old, just got out of a 20-year program, and they know everything? No, they'd be like, hey, I got another tidbit, and we'd be bantering back, and they'd know everything, and they'd be like, yeah, I'm going to run for this, I'm going to be president, we have all these people. We'd have a utopia. So yeah, I want to do bike school. But the way I want to do it is I want to get sanctimonium going. I want to ride so that I'm doing it myself. Okay, so I'm riding my bike 50,000 miles a year. I'm listening to the audiobooks every day. I'm coming home. I'm talking the audiobooks. I'm sharing what I'm learning. I'm finishing my website, my timeline, and that goes on for maybe 5 years. I'm 41 now. I want my students to be like, I like the idea of carrying history. So I like the idea of having like my student to be exactly 33 years younger than me because because Herodotus, he said when he went to the father of history, Greek father of history, he said when he went to Sais, Egypt, he was talking to the priests of Sais, and they had it was one of the capitals of Egypt, and he had they had like 300, I think it was 300 or 600, yeah, 300 busts of. Do I have my phone with me? I can do math. I can. Of all of the priests, but it was a hereditary lineage, so father to son lineage of the priests, kind of like a kingship, but it had been gone for 300 generations. So, but they didn't know how many years it was. That for some reason they didn't keep track of it because it was so long. But they did keep track of their generations from the busts, and so Herodotus came up with an estimation in his head of how long ago it was, based on how many busts, how many generations it was, and so he made three. He said 3 generations a century. Okay, so I think he came up with 300 generations. He came up with it was like 10,000 years that the priests of Sais had started in Egypt before Herodotus. So 12,000 years they had that priesthood with the busts and everything, and that's long since gone, but. I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? That it could go on for that long, not disrupted, and then it gets disrupted. Like our world has gone more turbulent since then. It was a lot more ironed out and consistent back then. But so for Herodotus to put 3 generations a generation, that's or 3 generations a century, that's a generation every 33 years. And so you're 33. So the priest was 33 years old when his son was born. Okay, so if I want to plug that into ancient Sparta, if you're going to have your mentor-student relationship, which you could also classify as your parent-child relationship, because I want the student-teacher relationship to be kind of like a parent-child relationship. The parent knows so much more than the student. They're teaching them and they're guiding them, but they're still close enough in age to have a relationship. And so I guess that would be the parent-child relationship. So 33 years old. So I'm 41 now. So my ideal student would be like 8 now. So I'll just wait another 5 years until my ideal student is of the age of beginning of the program at 13, because 13 is the age where people, kids usually start smoking weed at 13. They get interested in the sport they're going to be interested in, the subject they're being interested in at 13. Their balls drop. They hit puberty, they become like in a lot of traditions, 13 is the rite of passage. I think in the Catholics it's 15, so 13, a lot of people are full grown at 13, So and I'll be 40, 13 plus 33 is 33 plus 13, 46. I'll be 46, so that's still young enough to ride my bike. That's still young enough for me to be kind of like in my physical prime and in my mental prime at the same time. Like I'll be smart enough to really know my stuff and to be a responsible teacher. Because it's good to be a teacher, but I'm still not them. I'm a generation removed, so I'm not like your buddy. So I'm not like somebody who we're going to get distracted and do something else. We're going to stay focused on task. And I want to teach you because I know that, and also because I know that much more than you, that you're going to follow me and it's going to stay ordered and structured, and that you're going to feel like you have a teacher, a real leader. And so I think that's there's enough of an age gap, but there's also, you're close enough that you're going to be similar enough in strength. So 46 to 66. So the person's 13 when they start, and they're 33 when they get out. So they're young enough to get started on a career at 33, get started with a family, have their own kid at 33. But they just got through this amazing education. And the person who taught it starts at 46, and then they end at 66. So by the time they're done, they're still strong enough to keep up with the youngsters. So at the beginning, you've got a 46 to 13. So the 13 can keep up. A strong 13-year-old is pretty much as strong as a strong adult. Like when my brother went up in car in 6:17 when he was 12, and the fastest girl who can go up it is like 6:23 or something. So, 13-year-olds can be strong. And so a 13-year-old can be strong enough to ride the draft of a 46-year-old. And if the 46-year-old who's carrying all the extra food and clothing of a 13-year-old, and to keep up with the 46-year-old on the climb if he's holding his stuff, okay, and to ride the draft, you've got a mixed. Now, if you have the same pair, now you've got a 66-year-old and a 33-year-old. The 66-year-old, I think, is going to be strong enough to ride the draft of the 33-year-old. If the 33-year-old carries all the food and the clothing for the 66-year-old, could keep up with the 33-year-old on the climbs as well. Ned Overend is like, isn't he like 62 or something? And a couple of years ago, when he was like 60, he went up in Long's Peak in like just over 2 hours, which is like a super strong adult, you know. So by the time Ned Overend's 66, if he keeps riding, he'll probably be totally strong enough to ride the draft of some, you know, super strong 33-year-old, you know, and to go up a hill with him if they carry his weight. And so you can keep the relationship going, and you can feel how the strength levels pass each other, which is always interesting in competition. You know, then that point when you're the same level, there's always, if you're going to pass, there's that point when you're the same exact level, and then you can actually race each other with the same advantage, and that can be fun in its own right. And also the knowledge. By the time you're 60, you know, the relationship dynamics change. You know, by the time you're 66, you're kind of set in your ways. Maybe you're tired mentally, and you're just, you know, and you've kind of taken the back seat to the decision making. And by the time, so the 66-year-old, the mentor can see the whole development of their student from when they're a child all the way up until they're like totally opinionated and they're strong and they're ready to go. And you're like, wow. So then that person would have, and imagine if that person wanted to become a teacher themselves, you would have a window of 13 years, 33 to 46, to do whatever you want. Not ride your bike, travel the world. I don't know. Do the other cool physical feats in the other parts of the world where they do their adventures there, or whatever. And then you can come back and do the school starting at 46 and do it all over again. And then you have 40 years of it, and you've done it twice, and you've done a double cycle. That'd be a really interesting educational experience. And so throughout all of this, you're sharing what you know on YouTube and on your website. So you're also educating the world, and so you're having a blast traveling and being super physically fit and strong. Oh, and also it's good for the economy, because if you're physically fit and you're taking care of yourself, then you're going to be spending less money on doctors' fees and medicine and all that kind of stuff. You're going to be spending less money on frivolous stuff like restaurants, because you're only going to be wanting to eat pure and clean, wholesome food. So you're going to drown and choke out all of the junk food, all of the bad food, you know, bad drugs for people. You're not going to be interested in prescription drugs, because you'll be too healthy for that kind of shit, because you'll be exercising all the time. And you won't have to get heart surgery or you know, sicknesses that cost money, you know. Or hospitals will be empty because everybody will be healthy riding their bike, right? So that'll be good for the economy. And then they'll drop dead one day from riding too much or whatever, or they'll ride, and right. So then they won't be bans to society. Oh, and plus, when they do retire, they'll be still fit enough to move around, so they won't be needing people taking care of them, or they could still get a job, you know. So they'll be productive members of society, and yeah, they're not. So it doesn't spend any money, but you're having, but it also supports all of the healthy industries of the future, though, like hidden industries that don't take earth resources. Tourism, for example, you would be a great tourist if you're a bike schoolist, and you would be a great host to a tourist. You would be also very open to other cultures. It's a great way to bring cultures together when you're interested in history, because you become interested in all of history, world history. And you know the interactions between people, especially the development of Rome. And I didn't talk about this at all. When you're learning bike school, you're learning the development of Rome, and the development of Rome is the perfect model for the class struggle. How everybody used to be the same, and also you can see how people's ideas, how people kind of like the frog in the boiling hot water. You know, like if you throw a frog in hot water, he'll jump out. If you throw him in when it's warm and then you heat it slowly, he'll boil to death. And so, if we allow ourselves to change our mind and become more and more callous to other life forms and other humans, and more violent, then we'll eventually just boil ourselves to death. So, because I got an interesting insight from Pliny last night. He said, yeah, we should not be poisoning arrows. Humans are so bad. Other animals, when they want to kill an animal, they just kill an animal. Us humans, we poison our arrows to kill those animals and to kill other people. That's so bad because now we're going to poison the earth, and we're going to poison our water, and we're going to poison everything. And he was freaking out about dipping the tip of his arrow in poison because he thought he'd poison the whole world because of that. Imagine what he would think if he were to be inserted in this world. You know what I mean? Like, we may be boiling ourselves to death, and this is not natural, but we don't know it because we're just growing into a rape of the earth culture. And because now we're like raping each other, Like, if I want to help the world, everybody calls me a scam artist. A scam artist is like Donald Trump. Oh, he's the guy who's going to save the world. It's like, nobody knows shit. I'm boiling. Frog's boiling because we were like born in it, and it's just getting hotter. So, yeah. So, how did I get on that tangent? Because I was talking about something else. Yeah. So, yeah. You get different insights, all the different insights that you get from being bike tourists. Oh yeah, not spending money. It's good for not spending money. It's the perfect model for that's what I was saying. The bike tourist is going to be the perfect like bike schoolist or knowledgeable of history person is going to be the perfect person of empathizing with all the different levels of society. We need people who are going to empathize with all the different strata of society as well, the different races and cultures and different people, so that we don't try to get freaked out and try to make the rich people have all the money because they don't trust all those poor people and all that kind of stuff. Now, somebody who is interested, somebody who's open to all the different cultures will be somebody who's interested in history because you've studied all of them. You know their culture. You know them, and you know that we're all the same. Like you would look at somebody in Polynesia as just somebody like me who happened to be born there, and so that's why they act like that, or like somebody in the rainforest or something. But it's not like they're this other, and you can never, because like they're asking Ted Cruz. I was seeing Secular Talk videos the other day. They're asking Ted Cruz supporters at a Ted Cruz rally what they think of Muslims, and he's like, some guy's like, Muslims and Christians just can't coexist at all. So any Muslim just got to go back to where they came from because you just can't coexist at all, none and ever. So, you can't have people like that. You got to have people who think that we can all coexist and that we all, you're just a different shade of gray or whatever, So, and so somebody who's interested in history in a bike school is always, is gonna have empathy for that, but also empathy for the different strata, financial strata, economic strata of society, because that's the history of Rome. The history of Rome is where people at the very beginning were very independent, strong. You would till your own fields, and then as they took over other places, they sent out colonies, and then they would have rich people buy up the land that used to be owned by the enemy. And then they would get the slaves and like turn the enemy into slaves and have them till their land. So now you're not tilling your land anymore. And so now you've got the slaves, and so the slaves don't trust the rich. The slaves even had three slave wars, like Spartacus, actual uprisings. 70,000 people in Spartacus' army. So, and at one point, the rich people, the rich got rich in Rome that they were like renting their land out to all the renters who couldn't pay, and then like the Sabines were going to attack Rome, and none of the people wanted to fight. They wanted to get taken over because they didn't like their country anymore because they were just fighting for rich people who weren't protecting them. So they had to make the rich people absolve all of the debts. They absolved all the debts, and then they went to war, and they basically set it back to neutral. And it was basically something like that also when they went from a kingdom to a republic. And they changed land laws. You can only have like land the size of like a couple of acres. So and we did it also in 1936 with the glass, or right before it's part of the Glass-Steagall Act, where we stole all the money. We basically grabbed all the money from all the rich people and used it to pay Social Security and welfare and all the highways of America, highway systems, and Mount Rushmore, all that. So I don't know if it paid for Mount Rushmore, but it paid for a lot. We just took the money from them. So it's these like social resets, and so when you have the historical context of it, and you know what happens, and you know that people fight back, and that that people become useless when they're like mean and cruel, because there's plenty of stories of that, when they become too powerful and wealthy. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Lots of stories in that in history. So when you know that, you're not going to have a world full of ignorant people who are just trying to push down the other. It's just from ignorance, and learning history is the best way. So, and bike school is the best way to learn history. So, okay, so yeah, that's how it works. You always have a goal to work for. Even the teacher, I'll probably never be able to get 100% on my own history test, because how could you even fill that stuff out in 12 hours? You'd probably run out of time. You'd have to do triage, and then I'd forget. I can only remember so much. I can't remember everything that ever happened. So the teacher's always trying to be the best. Like if you have a student, like the teacher-student pair relationship, or the bike team or whatever, some kid could have, like, your teacher could be like at a 92%. You brag about that, and you'd be like, my teacher's better than your teacher. I've got a higher percent. And, well, my teacher's a better writer. Constant competition, constantly. And you can never get that good enough, because there's always that 100% everybody's fighting for. So that's how everything revolves around bike school. People are saying, you're just doing another project. Well, timeline, sanctimonium, audio history books, Power of 10, bike racer levels, everything all ties into bike school. So I'm basically making the website for the first educational school system that doesn't have anything. All it has is a website. All it has is a website and the participants. And so my goal is to ride my bike 50,000 miles a year, all day, every day. Come home, do my vlogging, act out my sanctimonium fantasy story, talk about current day news, the audiobook I read. Basically live the life of a bike school student and a bike school teacher. A bike school participant, because you're participating in it together. And see, that's the good, like the dynamic between, I don't know if I explained this, but the teacher and the student. It's good because it makes friendship, and you don't want them to hate each other like it is now. You want them to be, the student teacher be friends. And so when the student comes up, and then he teaches his kid, his student, with the utmost respect and love, just like he got from his teacher. How when the person beats on his kid, then he grows up to become a child beater. It's like that. When you love and you teach your student, teacher's going to love and teach his student, and it's going to open up and become the best way to become a more perfect union of free individuals. So you're always participating. And so I want to, so for the first 5 years, I just want to be doing that by myself. Try to get it, because you want to get it off to a good start. You don't want to jinx it in the beginning and then have it crash and just, look, it's a failure because he failed. So I want to just get myself going. I want to be able to do my miles. And so, getting money would be helpful, because then I wouldn't have to, because the idea was it would take all my time to do all that. It's a lot. Write all that, do the TV show, do the audiobook reviews, build up the website and the timeline, all that kind of stuff. And I think it's worthy of a grant from an educational foundation, even though I'm just having fun riding my bike all the time. It's like, we need to get out of that mindset. You can have fun and be productive at the same time. And then once I'm 46, I can take on my 13-year-old protege, But I think ideally, I think we do have the economy to be able to have one teacher, one student, and that's it. And even if you could have the teacher student as be their parent, so your job in society is basically to educate your kid. So basically, go ride with your kid and have fun with your kid all day long. Maybe we could even get it to that. But until then, you would have hired out teachers, and the teacher would have. I'll take 12 disciples, because I like having the historical analogy all the time. And Jesus had his 12 disciples, and they did their pilgrimage. Remember how he would follow like a pack, follow around the countryside? I want to do pilgrimage throughout countryside with my 12 disciples, drafting off me. Yeah, I'll take up to 12 students that I will take under my wing. That will be my responsibility to make sure that by the time they're 30, from 13 to 30, or whenever, not to be 20 years, but so that by the time they're done. Well, for me, I'd like it to be 20 years. 13 to 30. By the time they're done, they're going to be basically, they're going to do great things, and what they do with their life will be testament to the system, to bike school, and that will get bike school flying and become part of the new cultural, economic, educational system of America, which will then spread to the whole world, and then the world will be known as the planet of the bicyclists who just ride and race each other, and then get up and imagine fantasy worlds and compare them to what happened in the past and talk about it. Hardcore people. Everybody will be so jealous. No, everybody will want to immigrate here and be part of bike school. And so then, you could have like a fantasy land superimposed over in like ancient China or Babylon. You could move to Baghdad or Babylon, and relive Babylon by doing all the different routes out there, and the river routes and the trade routes and everything, with their school, with those Iraqis, and relive or the Romans who live in Rome. They could relive Roman Empire from Rome, just how I superimpose Rome here. They don't even have to superimpose it; they just do it there, Or Native Americans can do it if they ever learn enough about their history and put it together. They could retrace, anyways, throughout the whole world, and so. And then you could, and then when you travel, when you're 33 and you graduate, then you want to travel, you could go and you'd be motivated to retrace. And it's just a constant life of traveling. And so that feeds into the economy of the non-consumerist, destroying the earth economy of tourism. So then you become the ultimate tourist, right? The ultimate sharer of knowledge, so you're going to be, and plus you're going to be interested in everything. People who are interested in active and moving contribute to the economy. And so, and so I think it's the perfect way. And so, but I would like my prime disciple, I think I would like to have a prime disciple, though, somebody who I focus on, and I make sure that person, I'd have to make sure that person, because if I have 12, those people could be like, cool idea, Kyle, whatever, and then they dissipate. It's like, what? No, I have a prime disciple, and I hover over them like the Spartan teacher-student relationship. Like how it's supposed to be in Bike University in the future, where it's one teacher, one student. I would take up to 12 because I'm the first, and I'm extra energetic, and I want to teach people. But I would have one premium, just like how they did in the future, setting straight forth. Yeah, prime disciple. And I think I'd like it to be a girl, because girls are easier to keep up with when you're 66 years old and they're 33. Plus, chicks in spandex are cute to look at. And I think bike school also is the perfect way to show that women can actually live in the same world as the men, because they did a study where they had mixed, like in the Army, they had mixed groups, mixed sex teams, and then all male teams. And the mixed sex teams always did much worse than all the male teams, because chicks can't, you could get a chick to keep up with a dude on a run, or you could train a chick to keep up with a dude picking shit up, but you can't train chicks to keep up with dudes on both of them, running and picking shit up. Like when I did the 24 hours of Moab, I beat most of the chicks, even though I could barely breathe and my knee blew out and I was having muscle cramps and my training wasn't all that much. And I could also bench press 225 pounds for reps, and so that's why it's like these chicks, they get on these Army teams, these dudes, and then it becomes time to throw your 50-pound backpack over a 12-foot fence, and they just don't have the weight to do it, and so they have to get the guy to do it, and so chicks can't really keep up with dudes in an army type of situation, even though that's kind of natural, but I think a natural would be, maybe the woman holding the baby and the guy holding all the stuff, and then it evens it out, but also naturally the woman would stay home and guard the fort where the guy goes out in armies. But with cycling, with biking, women and men can actually live on par, because cycling is a strength to weight ratio sport, and women are so much smaller than men that their strength to weight ratio gets better. And with cycling, weight really matters, especially when you start packing weight on the bicycle, like your food and your clothing, and with bicycle, especially here with the mountains, when you're going up a hill, strength to weight ratio matters a lot. And so, like if you got, I haven't figured this out yet, but you could get like the best male racer in the world and the best female racer in the world, and you could have them go on an all-day ride together, and you could put all of their food for the day and all their extra clothing for the day on the male guy's bike, and they'd probably be around even. Like women are about 90% that of men in cycling and running and stuff, endurance sports. And that's the closest that you're going to see. With cycling, that's the closest that you're going to see women get to men out of any sport because of the strength to ratio. Women are also aerodynamic, physically aerodynamic, because they have the narrow shoulders and the big butts. They can cut through the air that way. They sit lower on the bike. They can draft off of men. Men create good drafts for women. And men are strong enough to actually, carry the weight for the women. But other than that, women are much closer to men in terms of strength than in a situation like if you're expected to do an army thing where you have to pick shit up, or if you're all like fighting. If it's like Fight Club, you wouldn't have men and women together. You would have to artificially throw bigger women in with the men. You couldn't have them all mixed in, and you couldn't have men and women mixed in with like soccer, because sprinting, men sprint faster and they bump in and they knock women down. But with cycling, women can keep up with the men. A lot of times even, the best women can be better than you have to be a pretty fucking badass dude to even be as good as the best women, okay, with cycling. So it's a perfect sport where you could have, you don't have to segregate it. You can throw them all together. And that's what you want to do. You want to throw everybody together. And so, you could have a male teacher could have a female disciple who could keep up with them. But for me, it would be easier with a female when you're older. A little bit more frustrating when you're younger. But women, 12-year-old girls are almost as strong as 12-year-old boys. So 13-year-old, by the time you're 13-year-old, it's not that much of a difference, So, and then as you get stronger from there, it gets more manageable. So it's really not a problem, Even when you're young, it doesn't matter what sex you are because they're the same strength. And then, and when you get older, women are good riders. So I think it's a perfect thing for women, and to get women into living in the same world as a man. You know what I mean? Being expected. Society expecting the same things from a woman as a man, and a woman expecting the same thing from herself as any man, like, oh, I can do the 200-mile bike ride. I'm going to do that too. We're going to go there. We're going to do that. They can do it. Physically, they can do it. So, and I think in the endurance stuff, women get even closer to the men because it becomes less of a physical thing and more of a mental thing. So, in every way, bike school touches all the bases. Yeah, so I think I'll let you all go. I've been babbling on forever. I don't want to an hour and a half just on this. Okay, so peace out. Bike school is the way. So I'm going to start by doing 5 years by myself, and then I'm going to take on my Prime Disciple for 20 years, and then my Premium Disciple. And then my other 11 disciples. So. Yeah, if you got any kids around that age, have them ready in 5 years. Have them ready for me. All right, peace out.